Hi there, welcome. My name is Lynn Dome, Women in Cybersecurity Executive Director. We often go by our acronym WICYS, WICYS, as in We Sisters. And so that's us. We're a community of over 5,000 members, allies, and advocates, all with a strong mission and passion to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. So we have over 5,000 members in 70 countries, and we have 37 professional affiliates in Africa, Australia, Canada, India, France, Pakistan, the UK, and all throughout the United States, and 130 student chapters in Canada, Costa Rica, India, Nigeria, Puerto Rico, and all throughout the United States. So our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity, and we do so by creating opportunities. So since we are a member-based nonprofit, we're a 501c3, we do have an online member forum where all our members can network and connect. Within that forum, we have special interest groups such as Latinas in cybersecurity, or data privacy, or compliance, or military spouses in cybersecurity. It's all about cultivating a community within a community. We have many different skill development training programs, such as the AWS one, our strategic partner that's hosting the webinar here today. They put together an entire roadmap for us for the year for the WICYS members that include AWS Game Day, in addition to AWS Executive and Senior Level Cloud Security Simulation. We have security training scholarships, gamified cybersecurity challenges, and many other initiatives within our skill development training programs. We have virtual and in-person career fairs, newsletters, webinars, scholarships, grants, and awards. We started as an annual conference back in 2014, and the annual conference still remains a very important initiative of ours. Our conference this year is September 8th through the 10th in Denver, Colorado. And if you're interested in attending, our regular registration opens up June 28th. And you could find out more about that on our website, WICYS.org. Under events, we have the WICYS 2021 conference. We have the Cyber Talent Emergency Fund, where cybersecurity students, if they have a financial emergency, such as their car breaks down or a medical expense, or they can't pay for their rent or their food, they could be issued up to $499 within 48 hours of applying for emergency fund. We have speaking and media opportunities because we want our members to showcase their talents, to put themselves out there and show what others can be. We have a Job Board Plus where all our strategic partners, such as AWS, has a booth at that Job Board Plus and can recruit from our members. All our members have the opportunity to upload their profiles, update their resumes, and be recruited from our Job Board Plus. We participate in market research, leadership summits. We have a very strong Veterans Assistance Program, Military Spouse Assistance Program, and a Veterans Apprenticeship Program. Our Speakers Bureau is outstanding, again, as ways for others within our community to get additional speaking engagements. And our Mentor-Mentee program has 707 mentees, 185 members, with a 12-month curriculum designed to upskill and up-level women no matter where they're at in their careers, to prepare them for their next level of advancement. Our next application for our Mentor-Mentee program will be opening up in August, so please mark your calendars and participate in our program at a capacity of either a mentor or a mentee, or as both. And we also have our Racial Equity Committee. Our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity, but we lead with equity, inclusion, and allyship. And what does that mean for all of WICYS? And so we owe that all to special thanks to our strategic partners, AWS, Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, Cisco, Facebook, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, Optum, AbbVie, Google, JP Morgan Chase & Company, Nike, SentinelOne, Workday, Dell Technologies, Envestnet, Flatiron, Fortinet, Haystack Solutions, Here Technologies, The Home Depot, IBM, MITRE, Oak Ridge National Lab, Palo Alto Network, SANS Institute, SAP, SmoothStack, SpearTip, Starbucks, Target, and the University of California, San Diego. And so before we go ahead and hand it on over to the AWS team, just a little bit of housekeeping is I'd encourage you to ask a lot of questions throughout the entire presentation. Our presenters, Emily and Dia, are going to be answering the questions either as they're coming in or save them to the end of the presentation. But while they're on your mind, at the bottom of your screen, you have the opportunity to post those questions, and we'll be viewing those questions as they're coming in and answering them throughout the webinar today. Also, we are going to be having a poll, and so we would encourage you to participate in that poll as well. And if you haven't done so already, join the WeSys community. We would love to have you as a member. Our student membership fee is like $20. Our veterans is $20. We have faculty fees and professional membership opportunities. In addition to that, we encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss a beat with WeSys. We're always launching new scholarship opportunities, media opportunities, speaking, you name it. We're here to bridge a gap, and we're here to help you achieve the career advancements that you're seeking. And so when you subscribe to our newsletter, you'll never miss a notification about all things WeSys. And then also we're all over social media. We're Facebook page, we have Facebook group, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And so without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand it on over to Dia and Emily. And, oh, okay, there we go. Were my slides even sharing that whole time or no? Did they stop sharing?
They were sharing most of the time, but I think the last two slides, they stopped sharing. The last couple of minutes there, we lost it, but they were sharing most of it.
Okay. Well, that's good. Well, everyone got the picture, at least. So I was looking at the other side. But I want to go ahead and introduce Dia and Emily from the AWS team, and they're going to go ahead and take it from here. So without further ado, I'll hand it on over to you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity to be here, and we are excited about being able to talk to you today about securing artificial intelligence. I'll start off with just a brief introduction and then hand things over to my colleague, Emily. So I am Dia Nguyen. I'm a part of AWS Professional Services, and I have been for the last 4 years. I have the privilege of leading one of our global practices focused on helping our customers go from principle to practice. And we do that by walking them through a process to have them define their operating model that drives customer outcomes, maximizes benefit, and minimizes risk with artificial intelligence. Emily?
Hi, thanks for that, Dia. And I've been working in AWS for the past 3 years, and I work hands-on with our customers in supporting operations, governance, and AI product development primarily. I work on projects that go beyond modeling to architect and build solutions for customers in industries where AI is used for use cases such as safety and compliance. So my area of expertise really is around these workloads that have governance needs in that space.
So let's go ahead and get started. So today in this talk, we're going to introduce you to and perhaps even challenge you to expand your thinking about security as it relates to artificial intelligence. When we talk about securing AI, it may be more than what you think. So we'll talk about artificial intelligence being all around us, security risks that we might encounter and that we see some of our customers encountering, what we do and the approaches we take to looking at security, and even the next step in being able to look at how do we define an operating model that really helps support securing artificial intelligence. And then finally, we'll end off with a couple of things that we believe is useful for you to consider and for you to do. All right, Emily, you can go ahead and take it away. Do you want me to build those slides all together, or if you're talking, I don't hear you?
Sure, and thank you, Dia. So artificial intelligence, we want to discuss what artificial intelligence really is. And excuse me, I'm going to mute my output here. So artificial intelligence is really any technique that enables computers to mimic human intelligence using logic, if-then statements, or machine learning. And so in terms of that, machine learning itself is a subset of AI, and deep learning within that is a subset of machine learning. So what we're talking about when we're talking about artificial intelligence is this whole family of techniques which support computers in mimicking those human intelligence processes, regardless of the technique. So one of these things to note here also is that AI is everywhere. So we're not really talking about true artificial intelligence or narrow AI or systems focused heavily on data for statistical prediction or deep learning. The point we're making today is that deep learning, AI, machine learning technology is everywhere and being used in every industry in simple and complex use cases. The AI boom is happening all over the world and it's accelerating quickly. So when we're talking about AI, we're talking about rapidly evolving enterprises, disrupting AI that disrupts industries, that enables business transformation, and changes how humans interact with the world. So early adopters to AI have significant benefits, including increased efficiency, cost reduction, improved customer experience. But today we're talking about cybersecurity and some of the challenges that customers raise to us at AWS. So there's growing concern that customers raise to us around governance, around energy, around food distribution, supply chains, healthcare, banking, and systems almost every day in almost every industry, as well as questions around how we can look at these systems, what they should do, what risks they involve, and how we can control them. So we have a poll question today to discuss some of this and to kind of ask you as the audience, what kind of conversations and questions you're seeing come up around the evolution of AI for your industry. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see the poll question coming up. And we'd love to hear your answers. Is this something that you're seeing in your industry? Is this something that you're hearing about in your area of work? Or is it something that you haven't heard about yet? Let us know. So we'll give about a minute for those polls to come in.
Are you all seeing the poll? I don't see very many responses coming in, so I encourage you all to go ahead and hopefully you see it and are able to respond. We'll keep the poll open for another 20 seconds or so. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Okay, and so we've got, the poll has ended. I'm going to go into it. It looks like where about 60% of you in the audience are looking to start applying AI and you have questions about where to start. Another 20% are already working on it and looking how to go further. And we've got another 20% that are not really seeing any questions yet. And just a few of you are seeing none of the above. So what I really want to talk about with this point here is that lots of people are just starting, lots of people are going somewhere else, lots of people are looking to see what's next. And so from the perspective of how we think about this and how customers use artificial intelligence and what sort of things they're looking to achieve, I'm going to jump to the next slide here. Oops. So customers are using artificial intelligence today to set the stage and set the context in here for you. Customers are using machine learning and artificial intelligence to move from this place of piloting to operationalizing. They're looking to see what they can get out of it, how they can handle real world tasks, and they're looking to integrate this into their processes.
So Emily was just sharing with you a bit about how artificial intelligence is everywhere, right? We're seeing, oops, sorry. We're seeing artificial intelligence show up in many areas of our work life, many areas of our personal life as well. And it's really having an impact on how we engage or interact. As Emily mentioned, we're also seeing companies in every industry really make major investments in AI in some form or another, whether it be in transportation or social media applications, at home in our kitchen devices now. I was recently looking for a new device, a refrigerator with Samsung. But regardless of where we might find it, where we might look, we're finding more artificial intelligence, machine learning being used and leveraged every day. Now, companies, as we talked about, really are starting to look at leveraging this to have a pretty big impact in their businesses, to give them a competitive advantage, as well as to be able to really to start to innovate in creative ways, or to gain some efficiencies in certain areas. Now, there are a couple of things that I also wanted to share in these examples here, right? We expect artificial intelligence to really be able to move in ways to help us to solve problems that perhaps were not achievable before, or really to begin to tackle some of the world's most challenging circumstances that we see. And these 4 customers are an example of some of what we've seen and what we've been able to do with AWS. So Yellow Credit is an organization that is really providing access to underrepresented by empowering them and giving them access to banking. The World Bank indicates that there are probably about 1.6 million people that are considered underbanked. Those are people lacking access to services from a bank or a financial institution. And that is typically seen in emerging markets. And so Yellow Credit has been able to identify, to put in place identity verification and validation, and is one of the major challenges that limit access that they now have been able to tackle leveraging artificial intelligence. This company is a financial services startup that provides access to credit in areas like Lagos, Nigeria, in the Philippines, and in Manila. And they're using Amazon Recognition to be able to give that access, analyze the images, verify a customer's identity, and then be able to provide them with financial and healthcare services with minimal friction. Now, Carbon Lighthouse, this is a great story because when we think about carbon pollution, which carbon is out of their name, it's usually associated with transportation, right? We think about a large number of vehicles stuck in traffic in our big major cities contributing to emissions that go into the atmosphere. However, this is something that I discovered, and many of us probably are not aware of, but buildings, commercial buildings, actually have a higher environmental impact or footprint than transportation does. And Carbon Lighthouse has a mission and a goal to be able to erase the 40% impact that commercial buildings have on carbon emissions. Their mission is to stop climate change by making it easy and profitable for building owners to cut their carbon emissions that are caused by waste energy. And to date, they've been able to reduce some 260,000 metric tons of emissions. Cerner is a company in the medical industry, a supplier of health information and technology solutions and services, as well as devices. And they are really tapping into AWS portfolio of machine learning and AI services, including Transcribe Medical, to be able to surface insights that would help them provide better healthcare to their customers, to streamline their operations, and to provide more personalized care. Now, there's one specific area that I want to highlight, and that's what they've been doing with heart disease. Some 6.2 million adults in the United States have heart failure. Heart disease is the leading cause of death from men, women, and people of almost any racial or ethnic group in the United States. One person dies every 36 seconds in the United States from cardiovascular disease. And Cerner, along with leveraging our services, have been able to develop a model that predicts congestive heart failure up to 15 months before clinical manifestation, before it's actually seen and impacting the body. Pairing this kind of predictive work that they're doing with their integration into health records really can help support making better decisions for care for their clients. And then finally, this is one that many have seen or heard about, perhaps, and this is about Thorn, a not-for-profit organization that's dedicated to stopping the spread of child sexual abuse material, as well as standing up to child sex traffickers. And Thorn has used their tools along with Amazon recognition to be able to identify close to 6,000 child sex trafficking victims and to rescue children where they were experiencing sexual abuse. And Thorn has seen some order of 65% reduction in investigation, which means that they've been able to find more victims faster. So these are, some great examples of artificial intelligence being used in tremendous ways to really have a great impact on society. But we can't sort of dismiss or ignore some of the challenges that are present when we look at leveraging artificial intelligence, and when we think about what's necessary to secure artificial intelligence systems.
So one of the areas of security focus for artificial intelligence really comes down to defining boundaries between users. I want to talk about 3 different areas where we think about securing AI. And it begins with defining and understanding realistic boundaries for what AI can do in any given use case. So unlike many types of software, AI is designed to respond dynamically to changes in user inputs. So if you think about the example of a shopping cart, when a user selects an item and puts it into their cart for purchase, the steps taken are very clear. And the same thing should happen every time a user selects add to cart. Even when the item changes, the action and the boundary for the system stay the same to the user. But that's not true for AI. For example, if you consider an application where a user can send in an image to a web service in that application to provide predictions of what items that image contains, there are many possibilities for how the system will respond to that input. And those boundaries need to be clearly defined and are an area of focus for securing AI. The next thing that we think about when we're looking at how we focus on securing AI is ownership. Ownership and enforcing that intended use and ownership for your systems and for your outcomes means owning the outcomes and providing paths for accountability and visibility. And this can mean that there are both architectural and procedural controls in place. For example, you might have architectural controls such as SSO to enforce that the logins that your users are going to be using to access. You might also have procedural controls such as before deploying your application that has AI in it to a production environment, you should follow a checklist before doing so. In addition, it's key while you're building and securing AI that you consider intended use. Intended use means that we are relating that ownership of those boundaries to the architecture and the solutions that we're choosing. So intended use relates to that ownership of the boundaries, and it can mean that any inputs or outputs may be monitored to meet the expectations of the system. And it also can mean that users of the system receive the information they need to understand how AI works for their use case, and that usability is considered in developing the AI. And that final area of security focus for AI comes down to compensating for operational and performance risks, such as the risk of impacts due to failures or changes, as well as any corrections needed for the model, for data, or for concept drift. These are areas where the performance may degrade or the operation of these components may break down over time. And when you're compensating for operational performance risk, you might look at how you can maintain functionality over time and make things available. The last thing that I'm going to discuss on this topic is to come back to the triad. So we're talking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. A lot of the focus when we're talking about securing AI comes down to making sure that you have these pieces and considerations in place for the integrity and availability. Confidentiality Confidentiality comes in when we're discussing data privacy and concerns and considerations there. But integrity really comes down to making sure that you well define those boundaries, those ownership and intended use practices, and compensate for operational performance risks to ensure that integrity isn't compromised. And when we're talking about availability, again, we're looking at compensating for operational and performance risks primarily.
So Emily, we have a question, and this question says, are there areas of focus specifically for AI, or are these relevant for ML as well?
And so I'm going to hand over to Dia to discuss some of the concerns that customers often raise about AI.
Sure, I'm just going to pause here because I see a question. There's a question here that says, are there areas of focus specifically for AI, or are these relevant for ML as well? So I think they're talking about our core security principles here. And yeah, Emily, do you want to take that, or I can?
And we do have a question. Are these areas of focus specifically for AI? Are they relevant for machine learning as well? They are relevant for both, because AI, again, as we've discussed, is kind of a superset containing machine learning, containing deep learning. So when you're talking about these core security principles and the areas of focus that you have for securing AI, you want to think about whether you're using machine learning or deep learning as well. So this is a great question. Thank you.
Hello, are you all hearing me? All right, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if you were hearing me. I apologize for that. It looked like for a second there, you might not have been. So let me go ahead and jump into this next slide. Thank you so much for confirming. So Emily was describing, some of our fundamental, what I would call, key security principles that we should be thinking about, and also some of the things that we consider in particular around artificial intelligence. I wanted to take a step back for a moment and then sort of have us look at and think about some of the other concerns that get raised when we think about artificial intelligence. And I think it's important to take a step back here really and look at these, because again, what I said about challenging our thinking around securing AI is more than just some of those standard or some core security principles that we might think about. Securing AI, when we think about confidentiality, integrity, and availability or reliability in the way that Emily was discussing, really requires us to consider these areas of concern that customers come to us with, right? Is there ability for us to see and understand the way in which the models or the predictions are being made? Are there methods for us to look at accountability and for people to be held accountable or responsible in ways where artificial intelligence might impact us? Are we thinking about what and how AI and the way that it's being applied might have an impact on human rights or civil rights? And so all of these are concerns that come to us and really require us to think. And when I say they're concerns that come to us, actually they're concerns that not only come to us at AWS when we're engaging with our customers, but they're concerns that other organizations and other people have as they start to understand more about how artificial intelligence is used and the impacts that it potentially has for society at large. Now, I put this here, right, because again, I said I wanted to have you think or to challenge a little bit in the way that we think about securing AI, shifting our thinking. And I went back to, I do this often, I go back to sort of the definition of words and think about what that means. And so secure is really about how we make safe by guarding or protecting something, putting something in position in order to ensure that it's free from danger or risk, to act in ways that make sure that it's safe against adverse contingencies. Right. And so securing AI is more than just protection against threats or potential vulnerabilities that you might think of in the cybersecurity context. it's really about being critical in how we look at and intentional about the impact that artificial intelligence has, and ensuring that there is integrity, confidentiality of the systems throughout the entire life cycle. Now, I was recently reading something, and there is a product manager out of a company who made a statement. He said there's no such thing as an AI model that is free of security problems, because people decide how to train them, people decide what data to include, people decide what they want to predict and forecast, and people decide how much of that information to expose. Um, I think that's a powerful statement, right? People are at the heart of this. Um, and so we really need people, individuals like yourselves, like our executives, people in all walks of life, really thinking about the kinds of changes and improvements that are needed in order to ensure there is safety or security. Now, when we think about artificial intelligence and securing artificial intelligence, it takes more than just traditional security, right? We think oftentimes about cybersecurity and ensuring that we have the right controls and best practices in play, that we put in proper order the kinds of infrastructure that is necessary to secure the or the controls that are necessary to secure the infrastructure, as well as the algorithms themselves, and that there is protection around the data, right? That we can also identify and manage the data dependencies and risks, right? And so while AI platforms rely on external data sources, companies and organizations have to actually think about how those external data dependencies can prevent risk to our business and to our outcomes or the intended use. So, it's important to have a strategy or an approach to looking at securing artificial intelligence. That includes a security strategy where we're focused on cybersecurity and information security, ensuring that we have data protection, but also governance. And for me, that really brings us to a point of thinking about this notion of an operating model. Now, we talk about this a lot in cloud technology. We talk about an operating model, the value and importance of having the alignment of people, process, and technology in order to deliver business outcomes, right? The technology is an enabler, but together with people and process, really, it helps us to be able to meet objectives and to innovate and scale. Well, we really want to think about that in a similar way when we talk about AI. With the rapid pace of change with artificial intelligence, we need to be thinking about a new operating model that just doesn't look at the technology alone or the algorithm alone or the product or system that we're building, but also is going to take into consideration the business needs, the people, and the processes together. That new operating model is essential to help us in accelerating and sustaining the adoption of AI and ML services. So this operating model describes how business and IT or technology align capabilities to help us achieve objectives, right? The business might be interested in increasing speed and agility, operational excellence, security and compliance falls sometimes on the technology side. Technology or IT might be responsible or concerned about how we drive greater compliance and security. Those things together, really the alignment of both parts is what drives value, not just for the business, but also for our customers. And so work needs to be done to define an operating model. Now, I know I'm not talking to an organization right now, but I think this whole thought process of thinking about an operating model is the way that we actually drive or ensure that we achieve securing artificial intelligence is important. And the way that we do that when we start to think about how we have this conversation with customers is to look at what I would call pillars of responsible use. Now, if any of you are familiar with and have looked at, some other organizations and some standards bodies, they're starting to bring out or deliver principles of responsible use or ethical principles for artificial ethical AI. These are very similar, these that we use, and they're probably in the order of some 80 to 100 different documents out there now with some degree of commonality. The first is, right, the first one that I like to often mention is around value alignment, right? Are we looking at how the system is being designed and used, and if it's in ways that really align with our mission, vision, values, any societal norms or regulatory needs? So in the companies that you work, right, if your organization says that they value diversity, for instance, right, or they value inclusion, then you would be wanting to look at, are we looking at our systems in a way, or is the intended use or the application of the system that we're using really going to reflect that we care about diversity, or we care about inclusion, or we care about our customers, right? And so that's where we start with value alignment. The other is diversity. I just mentioned that, and I know that, certainly after a number of things that happened in the last year, and just the conversations that the industry at whole has been having about the importance of diversity and representation. And we also heard that at the beginning in the introduction, that that's one of the values of this organization, bringing in and attracting women into cybersecurity or into this industry. Diversity is important. And there was a study with AI Now out of NYU that talked about the fact that they believe that erroneous outcomes from our AI systems is the result of the lack of diversity. It's a diversity problem. And why is that? We want to make sure that we have not just the diversity of people coming from different schools or organizations or parts of the business, but we also believe that the lived experiences of others actually has an impact on the way in which we look at implementing and using the technology. And so diversity is important, not just with the data scientists that might be building or training a model, but it's also important at every part of the entire life cycle. Training and education is important. And I often talk about this coupled with accountability. Why? Because we want to ensure that we have humans in the loop. You might have heard that term. It's really about making sure that we have people aligned at every stage of the process that really can be accountable and responsible for what's happening and the way in which these systems are being used. And in order for them to be fully accountable, that means that they have to have the necessary training and education. Now, oftentimes, some people will think about problems or concepts around responsible use and addressing sort of ethical risks or concerns as being the problem for the data scientists. But it's also the problem for the CTO or the chief data officer. It's also the problem for the resources or concern that the resources that would be tagging our data is concerned, that has to be concerned about. It's also something that our product managers need to have an understanding and awareness of. And if we have a body that's already focused on, ethics or compliance, that they need to have some awareness of. And so we can't assume that just one person, we all have a part to play in ensuring that we really are securing artificial intelligence in a proper way. Data privacy and protection, this probably comes familiar to you all or some of you in the audience, right? You've heard these terms because this is very similar to what we would talk about in the traditional sense of cybersecurity and data privacy, ensuring that we protect the quality and integrity of the data. We ensure that people have the right controls and the right access to it, and that how it's being processed and how it's being used was what was intended. Fairness is really about ensuring that we have ways in which to address bias. Bias actually hurts those people oftentimes that are marginalized, women and other communities. And so we want to make sure that we're putting in and considering ways in which we can mitigate bias. Some of that is through some of the steps that we talked about earlier, right, with having diversity and looking at value alignment and accountability, but others are going to be, with what we do and evaluating the data and the models. And then transparency and explainability, right? Making sure that we have a way and that we're doing things, the one to be able to explain and understand elements relevant to the AI systems, the data, the business model, and in a human understandable way. And that always isn't the easiest, but that's where we start to look at other things that we put in place in the way of auditability and inspection in order to be able to achieve that. I'm going to pause here just a second and see if there are other questions. I don't, so we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So when we talk about securing artificial intelligence, really it's about how we employ and leverage the technologies in responsible ways, that we're developing responsibly and that we're using it in responsible ways. And that means that we take those principles really to allow us to ensure that as we advance in this area, that we're respecting the rule of law, that we're considering human rights and dignity, and these shared values of inclusiveness are being considered. Since AI systems are learning, right, leveraging our data to make decisions, we've got to do the work, right? And I say the work, I really should say we should be taking intentional steps to make sure that we're considering these other areas in order to ensure that our data is not reflecting historical or social inequities, that we're sensitive to the characters of the use cases that we're employing, that we're looking at features such as gender and race and orientation where appropriate in order for us to mitigate bias, but that we also are doing things to remove those characteristics when it's not necessary or appropriate. And when we start doing those things, really, that's where we get to the point of securing artificial intelligence, safeguarding it, or safeguarding its use and its implication and implementations in ways that don't have unintended impact and cause harm. So I told you that we were going to end this really with a couple of actions for you. Hopefully the information that we shared perhaps broaden your perspective or cause you to think a little bit more differently about what is necessary in order to secure AI. The first action is really about you raising your awareness, right? Being in sessions like this certainly helps, but then taking that a little further, right? To understand what can I do from, in cybersecurity, or what else, how is artificial intelligence being used in ways. There are great resources, books, sites, organizations that are all talking about this. And so we not only want to make sure that individuals do, but that we also challenge our teams at various stages or in our companies to really think about being educated and informed in ways around responsible AI. Then it's about assessing your level of responsibility and operational readiness, using those pillars or any others that you might consider out there in the industry as ways to evaluate, to consider how is my organization actually using this, and are we thinking about these other areas, and where possible challenge the thought or raise some questions, hopefully that will help people to look and to understand where there are considerations and intentional consideration not being given that could have an impact on people, on society, and how do we make adjustments for that. And then finally, this really is much more broad, a bigger sort of task or challenge for organizations. And that is really to start looking at a plan to close the gaps, right? If we're not, and we don't have diversity on our teams, right? What do we do to close the gaps? What is the plan that we can make or put in place in order to start to look at, bringing diversity in? If we're not looking at if we don't and haven't really made an intentional sort of step towards fairness, are there things that we can do AWS has a tool, SageMaker Clarify, that allows us to detect, bias in our data. And there are other open source tools as well that can be leveraged, right? It's about really starting to take action and look at, where are gaps, where are opportunities for us to be able to step into or to take to really begin to move towards securing AI, safeguarding its use, and ensuring that it does not cause harm. So hopefully this has been useful to you. I will pause here. This is the end of the formal sort of part of the presentation, and having you think about securing AI and doing and implementing practices of responsible use that actually helps you to safeguard and to ensure that we don't to ensure that, or to move towards preventing harm with artificial intelligence that's being leveraged. So thank you so much for the time. Now I'm going to look and see. I think I did pretty good in leaving us about 15 minutes here for us to answer questions. I see here one. AI was used to determine the most beautiful women in the world, and all but one of the 20 women selected were white. Questions about how a seemingly objective mechanism produced such a biased result were answered after it was discovered. Yes, absolutely. Um, uh, this is a great point. So I'm not sure if others see this question. Let me just read it, or this comment. Let me read it aloud here. And I probably didn't do a good job at the first time. Let me repeat myself. AI was used to determine the most beautiful women in the world, and all but one of the 20 women selected were white. Questions about how a seemingly objective mechanism produced such a biased result were answered after it was discovered that Sports Illustrated swimsuit models' pictures were used as the training data. In the end, AI is only as good as the quality and diversity of its training set. I would say, it goes beyond that, though, right? Because I think that even when we have quality data or diverse data, there's still places where we can end up with impact. And so, again, I think those principles that we just talked about are useful for us to make sure that we really are producing AI for good, right? Or AI in ways that can impact and have the broader kind of impact that we saw in those examples that we just described earlier, right? That we actually can solve the problems and simplify some things in cases where it's appropriate, and see much wider spread use to even in some ways tackle the inequities that we've seen systemically, because those things are possible, right? But it's really about having the people that are willing to make the changes, having people that are well educated in ways so that they know the things to look for, and are willing to understand the context in which data and these systems have an impact, and want to make adjustments to that. It is putting in the technology or the tools and leveraging those in ways to make sure that we're inspecting for bias and even unintended impact. I'll give you a good example, right? If an organization decided that they wanted to use artificial intelligence to help and pick specific products or recommend products for individuals, right? You could very well limit your accessibility or your market if you're not looking at your data in a holistic way, or if you're looking at your data historically and only certain people or only certain communities leverage your products in the past. And so while that may not necessarily qualify as bias or something as egregious, it has an impact or unintended impact if you're missing a part of your segment that you actually wanted to reach. And so it's necessary for us to be thinking about and inspecting the data as well as results at various times or cycles, so that we can actually be clear about what the impact is and evaluate against the one value, our values, right? Aligning that there, but also the impact as far as its intention and the problem that we're trying to solve. Among availability, confidentiality, and integrity, would you say that one or two are more important than the other? Oh, Really interesting. So if I think about confidentiality, right, protecting against unauthorized or disclosed information or access, ensuring that there are what is private remains private and accessed only when necessary. Um, Integrity is really about protection from unauthorized modification or unintended use, that we can, it really ensures that we can trust the way that the system is being used as well as the data. And then availability, right? The value or functionality of the system and making sure that it's available when needed. I think I had to review those in my mind really quickly in order to, let me stop sharing my slide. I had to review those in my mind really quickly before I answered the question. But I think that I probably would say, in my mind, integrity is most important. I think those three, though, pillars are work together really to ensure sort of the safety or security or safeguarding of the system. But I mean, if I had to pick one, I think it would be integrity, right? Ensuring that the system is not modified or altered in ways, the system and or the data modified and altered in ways that cause it to be inaccurate. And that probably would be out of which flows, some of the challenges that we might see in some of the other areas as well. Let's see. Among available, okay, I got that one. What are some helpful tools that may be available to those? Business modeling. Now, I think, I'm not sure that I've seen as many items in the way of tools there. And this sort of connection is somewhat new. I actually had a conversation with someone over the weekend who was asking about, like, how do I make the shift from cybersecurity into or focused on artificial intelligence? And I think what you'll find is a lot of the articles that we see oftentimes talk about people leveraging AI in ways to actually help improve, understand cybersecurity attacks, be more aware, to act proactively. And so that's a lot of the discussion in articles and even tools that I see, around cybersecurity. I'm not sure that I see the connection so much with business modeling, but if I think anything there, I'll share it with the folks here, and maybe we can get that back to you. Or you can reach me on LinkedIn, and I'll have a look and look for to provide an answer for that one. But I can't think of anything offhand that is actually drawing that connection. It's still really a new sort of area of focus that we're thinking about. Interesting comment about the women's contest. I've seen a lot of content and sites lately on AI ethics, but it sounds like not many companies are taking it seriously. What is your experience, right? So great point. This is a really new and emerging field, right? 5 years ago, you probably wouldn't have heard a lot about AI ethics. And to be honest, probably in the last decade is really where we've seen, movement in the way of companies really gaining and using this more widespread. But I'll tell you that artificial intelligence has been around for a while in some form or another. Now, people often talk back to 1954, where sort of its early stages, but what we've been seeing it used a while, right? Whether that's in recommendation engines that look at your past history and performance and other people around you that might be similar to you that are using or that might have purchased a product, and how we make recommendations. I mean, that's probably one of the earliest forms that we've seen in more, widespread use, but it's been around for a while. But this notion of ethics around it is really new. This notion of, are we clear about how it's being used and its impact? And I think that's because people are starting to understand that more data that we have and the more data that we're leveraging, especially in the historical context, the more risk that needs to be considered. And what we're finding is that companies understand that there are potential risks. They're starting to be much more curious and interested about having the conversation. And starting to move their way to taking action. And I would say to you, I have to say honestly, that the events that happened last year in this country helped to move some of the needle as far as people thinking more and being more aware or intentional about it. Because the reality is that when we think about the impacts of some of the systems, it has an adverse impact on marginalized communities. And that's often because their voice, their perspective, their lived experience is not infused into how we're building systems, how we're looking at solving the problems, how we're considering actually implementing solutions or looking at the data. And so last year had a huge impact on companies starting to make the shift. I think the other part of where you're going to see companies take it seriously as we move towards more governance coming from, or more policy coming from, legal and government, and that's starting to happen in other countries in the EU. A couple of weeks ago, there was a proposal for policy that is going to come in governing AI use, and in particular in high stakes use cases. And we're going to start to see that. There was the commission here in the US on AI, and there were recommendations that came out of that 400-page document, 400+ page document. And so as those recommendations and these studies are being done, they're going to actually drive legislation that will come. And then organizations will be much more prompted or forced to actually do more than just research and investigate, but actually implement things to ensure that there is security, safety with how the systems are being used. From your experience, is security included in the design of AI or happening after its implementation? So a little bit of both, right? We're seeing both. We're of the mind, it's certainly at our company, we say security is job zero. And so, infused into our projects and certainly our methodology for implementing with our customers is, there's a work stream around security, and we're doing work, right, to talk more about what that looks like, partnered with or in the AI context, and making sure that our customers are thinking about that. But again, I think this is still sort of new and evolving. We see a lot of use cases where customers are leveraging tools that help them to understand patterns of risk or patterns of vulnerabilities and things like that. Operational sort of tools that get leveraged. But there is much more conversation and appetite for looking at how do we not only safeguard the infrastructure itself, but also what we do with the data across the board. So we're seeing a bit of both, but certainly more is happening, and we encourage those considerations to happen in the earlier stages of the project in design as opposed to implementation. It's always hard to sort of retrofit or to make adjustments after you've gone down the path of implementation. And that's one of the things we talk about with the cloud in general, right, is starting to move some things to earlier stages in design and not wait for after implementation and think we throw it over the fence and somebody else has to be responsible for it. So we kind of keep those same core mindset about it with AI as well. All right, well, I think we are just about time here. I was looking to see if there were other questions. I enjoyed the opportunity to chat with you. This is one of my favorite topics. So for sure, this is the work that I do with our customers. And so it's always good to hopefully increase the awareness for other people as well, not just our customers, but just people being aware about how the technology is being used and the impact that it has and how all of us have a part to play. So hopefully you're able to take a couple of things from this experience, this talk, and perhaps you'll dig in a little bit more and do some more study. You'll find a path for yourself into looking at artificial intelligence and security a little bit more closely, or you'll really be a part of helping to influence some of the change that's needed to ensure that our systems are actually doing no harm. So thank you so much. We appreciate you being here today, and we'll bid you all adieu. Take care.